Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Caskets, Reflections, out August 11th on Sharp Tone Records. This album has 10 tracks, 38 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a UK post-hardcore metal band. As far as the design goes, this album is very engaging. It's an album that has a lot of similarities, but it also has a lot of differences, and it doesn't allow those similarities to dictate the experience of the record. This album is never going to feel repetitive. It doesn't matter how many times you listen to it. Also, being 38 minutes in length, it helps to that same experience. It never gets boring. It never gets redundant. It's an album that takes you on a roller coaster ride from the first all the way to the last track, allowing you to experience not just musicals ebb and flows, but also emotional ebbs and flows as you move, as you progress from song to song. Great design, great execution. As far as the soundscape is concerned, this album is a reflection of the broad spectrum of emotions that it represents. And when you have a broad spectrum of emotions, you can never really represent them all in the same way, because they're going to be different. They're going to have different dynamics. They're going to have a different mood associated with them, and they just have different characteristics. So allowing different genres to influence the sound is the best way possible to be truthful to the emotions that you're trying to portray. This album has everything from pop to metalcore to hardcore to post-hardcore, and using the best of those genres really allows them to create a very textured and dynamic sound experience from song to song. It's also an album that has great production behind it. The songs are crisp, the songs are clear, but they're not thin and they're not linear. So you have a way of simplifying the overall texture and layers of the sound, simplifying everything that you're infusing into these songs in a way that it's easy for the listener to process, easier for the listener to digest, easier to get deeper into the songs and understand not just the sound, the experience that comes from it, the mood and atmosphere that it creates, but also going a little bit deeper into the lyrical content and really squeezing everything out of this record with every single track. It's a much deeper album than it appears to be at first glance. Because of the easy way of processing and the easy way of digesting it, it might feel like it's a very linear, straightforward record, but it's not. The more you listen to it and the deeper you dive, the more you realize how wholesome this album is from a lyrical standpoint, but also how much it has to offer and how painful it is at times. It's a really interesting sounding album from that perspective, because it allows you to feel different things about it. It allows you to go in different directions, but always in a very simplified way, hiding the overall complexity that it offers. I love the sound experience from that standpoint, because it can take you in two different directions with it, or it can provide you two different experiences. If you just want to press play and enjoy the tracks and do something at the same time, you can totally do that. But if you want to dive deeper into this record, dive deeper into the band, into what they're reflecting about, then this album offers a completely different journey sound-wise. Within that sound, I think you can touch on three different items that play important roles, different roles, but important roles in the overall soundscape. And that is the electronic elements, the guitars and drums. The electronic elements are a huge part of the soundscape of this record. They're not necessarily driving the experience, but they're definitely helping shaping it. And when they tie up so nicely with the overall guitar sound, you have a 1-2 punch that creates the backbone of the entire soundscape on this album. The guitars are melodic at times, they are heavier at times, they are melancholic at times, they offer a lot of diversity, and most often than not, they're really the catalyst that pushes you in a certain direction, or that elaborates on what the mood of the song is all about. But the electronic elements then come in, tying into that experience, and they emphasize it. They make it a lot more visible. They make it a lot more palpable for the listener. The drums play an important role, but one that doesn't have the same impact as those two previous elements. The drums are not powerful. They're not overpowering at all throughout this entire record, but they ground the album and they give it a little bit of soul. They are there in order to make the soundscape a little bit more composed, but they're not there in order to get in the way of everything else that it's happening. This is an album that doesn't depend just on one piece of the puzzle. It rather depends on all of them coming together in a very elaborate way, in a very layered way, in order to create the sound that they wanted from this record. The drums are no different. I like the experience of the drums because they still had an impact, even though it wasn't one that was in the forefront. It's a very subtle impact, but a subtle impact that creates a good experience and gives a little bit more of a rich overall experience to the sound on this album. Vocally, Matt's vocal performance is on point. He's very dynamic and sometimes subtle in how dynamic he really is. But just the same we can talk about the sound and explain how dynamic the sound needs to be in order for you to really feel the broad spectrum of emotions that this record puts forward. The same has to be said for the vocal performance. You can't take a one-size-fits-all approach and hope that that's going to be enough in order to translate what these songs have in store for the listener. You have to go a lot deeper than that. You have to peel the layers, you have to remove the veil and be a little bit more naked, a little bit more vulnerable in front of the listener. And I felt that's exactly what Matt's approach was on this album. It was almost more of a storyteller approach than just singing and talking about emotions. It's more looking from the outside in, not necessarily from the inside out. A different approach from the previous record to this record, but one that matched the overall construction of the album and definitely matched the individual construction of the songs. All around, a very easy album to listen to, an album that offers a lot of different momentums to it. And like I said earlier, a record that's really going to depend on the listener on how deep do you want to go. So depending on how you approach it and how much you want to get out of it, this album is going to give you exactly what you're looking for in the way that you're looking for it. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with In the Silence. This is one of those songs where the drums pop a lot. They pop at the beginning of the track, throughout the track, all the way to the end. This still allows the electronic side of the song and the guitars to complete that overall experience. In this case, you feel like the drums are in the forefront and the other two elements are in the background, complementing everything else. A very different style, a very different approach than most of the tracks on this record. Vocally, more intense and direct approach in the verses, and then with some backing vocals in the chorus, you definitely feel like there's a little bit more room to breathe. There's definitely a little bit more air, but at the same time, this creates a lot more depth as well. So it's a vocal approach that at times it feels consistent, but the nuances and changes that they infuse in the chorus really allows you to see a difference, a growth, a movement from one part of the song to the next. It's a great track, a very bright sounding track that has a lot of emphasis, and the vocals really emphasize the brightness of the track itself. Next, you have 6 Feet Down, a more aggressive, dynamic song vocally. Definitely the vocal approach on this track is different. It feels a little bit deeper. It feels like it comes from a different place. It pushes the experience of the song from the melancholic to the aggressive. And that's something that creates a huge gap in between. But you see that progression really well throughout the entire track. The sound is very warm. The sound is very wholesome in this song, allowing that experience vocally to feel even more apart at times than what it would otherwise. The guitars and drums allow themselves to work really well as one and create that warmth experience together. The chorus definitely brighter as far as the sound and vocals are concerned, but it's a track that has incredible ups and downs. It really feels at times a little bit like a Jekyll and Hyde style song, giving a lot of life to the overall track and the experience of listening to it. Last but definitely not least, Silhouettes, a softer track all around. I mean, if I was to call this song a ballad, I don't think I would be that far off. It's not a ballad per se, but it's more of a metalcore style track in terms of the melancholy and sadness that comes with it. And that's where that ballad feel comes to life. It's a softer track musically, softer track vocally, allowing more for an introspective approach into the song itself. This allows the track to have a sense of growth in the sound, but it also allows for the melancholy to morph into something else. You see more of that calm approach, that deeper approach in the verses, and then a slight bigger approach in the chorus, which is prototypical also when you look at a ballad. A ballad normally seems a lot more linear, a lot more straight through in the verses, and then a little bit more over the top once you get to the chorus. This track has a lot of similarities with that design, has a lot of similarities with that approach. The interlacing of the vocals in the chorus is really interesting because it creates a nice depth. It feels like you have multiple voices coming in together as one, but not necessarily in a choir style, more as a relay of vocals. And that's something different that works in a song like this, because you go from almost feeling like the life is being drained out of you in the verses to then feeling like the life is being injected back into you in the chorus. So I really enjoyed the vocal approach all around in Silhouettes. This is it, Caskets, Reflections, once again out August 11th on Sharptone Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.